家午安。第二场语谈言论自由与内容审查团体，由行政院联名新政务委员担任我们本场的主持人。
Good afternoon. Welcome to our second session. Our moderator for today is Ming-Xin Lin, Minister without Portfolio. Next, I would like to invite our distinguished guests on stage.
Joining us on the stage, first, please welcome David Wright, Chief Executive Officer of Southwest Grid for Learning. Welcome. Next, please welcome Camila Bustani, Director International at Ofcom. Mrs. Bustani, please join us. 接着，我们欢迎台湾媒体观察教育基金会。
Next, I would like to invite Jerry Fang, Senior Public Relations Manager of DCARD.
最后，我们欢迎迪
And then we have Ms. Huiru Chai from Taiwan Media Watch Foundation. Next, I would like to turn the floor to our moderator. Good afternoon. My name is Ming-Xin Lin, Minister without Portfolio from the Executive Yuan. I welcome you back to our forum today. The topic of our session is freedom of speech and content moderation. It is important to balance freedom of speech and human rights. It is also a part of very important part of governance. Currently, there is a trend towards accountability, and there has been a lot of discussion on this issue. Today, we want to address this issue from the legislative perspective, academic perspective, to discuss how we can attain balance. In this session, we have invited four very prominent speakers from the government, from the academia, and also from the business sector. First, we have from the UK, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. David Wright of the West Grid for Learning. He will share with us their mechanism to prevent the disclosure of NCII. Second, we have Ms. Camila Bustani, who is from International Ofcom, the International Director. She will talk about the relevant measures undertaken by OSA. Next, we have from Taiwan Media Watch Foundation, Ms. Cai Huiru. She will talk to us about accountability and possible measures that we can take. And finally, we have Senior Public Relations Manager from DCARD, Mr. Jerry Fang. He will talk to us from the business perspective. He will talk about how operators look at freedom of speech and content moderation. Let us now welcome our first speaker, Mr. David Wright.
If it would be possible, actual fact, I think it would be excellent if Camilla may well start us off, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Minister. It's a pleasure to be here with you. A real privilege to be here in this with all these amazing colleagues. It's already been a really fascinating day. I am Director of International at Ofcom. Ofcom is the communications regulator in the UK, and over the last few years, we were given new duties around online safety. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Ofcom has regard to freedom of expression in the context of online regulation. I'll also then look at the act that we're responsible for implementing, and then I'll look at the role that platforms have to play. So I'll start by saying that Ofcom is an independent regulator. It is independent of the state. of the government, I should say, but it is a public authority, and so we are bound by the European Convention on Human Rights, including Article 10, which is about freedom of expression and information. So in all of our actions, we have to have due regard for the impacts on freedom of expression and information. We have quite a bit of experience already doing this since we were originally created in the early 2000s, because we're also the broadcast regulator. So we're used to balancing freedom of expression against other competing public policy objectives. And so with the Online Safety Act, we have to have due regard every time we issue guidance or codes of practice or any regulatory decisions, including enforcement actions. We've got to have due regard for freedom of expression. It's worth remembering, though, that even under the European Convention of Human Rights, the ECHR, freedom of expression is not absolute. And nation states and public authorities are able to impact upon it, infringe upon it, let's say, in very limited, justified circumstances where the law requires it. And that's very constrained in the ECHR, but it includes grounds like national security, the protection of health or moral rights, and the protection of others' rights. So it's a nuanced picture. So let's move on to online safety regulation. I think online safety regulation will always have the potential for impacting on freedom of expression, also by definition. So our exercise of Article 10 duties to have due regard are all the more important in that context. But the Online Safety Act, the OSA, has been designed already with that in mind. So the very first page of it makes reference to freedom of expression and the rights to privacy. The scope of the Act is limited. It's really important to remember the baseline of the Act does not interfere with adults' right to access legal content. It is intended to address access to illegal content or exposure to illegal conduct, and the exposure of children to harmful conduct or content, including illegal, but also some not illegal. It's also important to note the OSA is not a takedown regime. So we discussed earlier about how in some jurisdictions there is a desire to legislate to enable regulatory authorities to request particular pieces of content to be removed. That's not what the OSA does. It's what we call a systems and processes-based regime. What does that mean? Essentially, the way I like to describe it is that this law, similar to the DSA, which Benoit spoke about in the last session, it imposes on platforms, for the first time ever, the obligation to take responsibility for the choices that they make when they design their services and their products, and then to be accountable to a regulator like us for those choices, and to be transparent about them on a continual basis. It's a risk-based regime also, so it's not one size fits all, and we target our interventions where the risk is highest. So that's Ofcom, the Act, and now the platforms. The platforms also have a role to play. Of course, they are private companies, so platforms are not themselves subject to Article 10 of the ECHR, and that's when regulation comes in. We've talked a lot about regulation as a means to address online harms, but also the way that the regulation is designed is a means to help ensure that platforms, as they do address online harms, are protecting freedom of expression. So that includes, for example, the fact that they do content moderate. They have content moderated since before the first piece of online safety regulation came into being anywhere in the world. The difference with regulation now is it requires that content moderation is transparent. So we need to understand, as Benoit described earlier, what are the algorithms? What are you trying to achieve with them? They need to be accountable to regulators for those choices, not just for their content moderation, but for really any of the design features, any of the functionalities on their service. They also have to have different types of redress complaints mechanisms for users who might feel that their content has been wrongly interfered with in the process of moderation or in the process of meeting the duties. And then we've got specific protections for journalistic content and news publisher content as well, because those are considered to be special categories of content that deserve extra protection. So we've talked a lot about how regulation might have an impact on freedom of expression. It's worth noting that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive concepts, and that in some cases, online safety can actually enhance freedom of expression, and that's really important to remember. So we find that to enable people to participate fully in the online world, they need to have a safe online environment. And we find that particularly vulnerable groups, and within those, particularly women and girls, can find the internet a hostile place, and that can have a chilling effect on their ability to express themselves freely online. We've done quite a bit of research at Ofcom. We've done some research specifically on women in politics to understand the nature of the online hate and abuse that they suffer and where it comes from, what motivates it, and what impacts that has on them, on their ability to even do their jobs. We've also looked at the occurrence of online hate and abuse in the context of sports personalities and broadcasting personalities, to really understand the impacts of an unsafe online environment on people's freedom of expression. And last year we published a guidance document on helping to ensure a safe online environment for women and girls, specifically identifying the areas of harm to which they are disproportionately vulnerable, and providing some best practices for platforms to implement in order to protect them. So I will leave it there. It's a good moment to pass on to David. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation as well to come and join this important subject, an important, impressive panel as well. A real privilege to be part of that discussion. As it says, I'm David Wright. I'm CEO of the UK charity SWGFL, and I'm going to focus my contribution here on non-consensual intimate image abuse, or NCII. It's a practical case study of how platforms can respond to serious online harm without undermining freedom of expression. So like I said, from a charity, SWGFL, we're 26 years old this year as a non-profit based in the UK. We're, since 2011 as well, been the UK Safer Internet Centre alongside 31 other European national safer internet centres. What you can see here is our charitable primary purpose, is that everyone should benefit from technology free from harm. And one of our primary ways of achieving that is through helplines. We operate 3 helplines, but the one I want to focus on here is our revenge porn helpline. The helpline was set up back in 2015, one of the first of its kind in the world to support adults who are experiencing NCII. And just to give some context around that, we publish annual reports. This is the one that most recently has been published. We're about to publish 2025's. As Camilla said, we find very clearly that this harm of NCII predominantly and disproportionately affects women. In this case, we only support adults, not children. That's other agencies that work with in that space. So disproportionately affect women, as you can see from some of this data. Also, the caseload. We've seen an incredible, significant rise in case volume. Back in 2019, the team managed 1,600 cases. Every year that's grown to last year was just over 25,000 cases. So we've seen a 20-fold increase of just sheer caseload around NCII, because it is very practical. It's all about getting content, supporting victims to get content removed where it exists online. We have had mention today already, and I'm not going to merely go into any further details short of this is what we find as the new frontier in terms of complexity to cases around synthetically created NCII content. But I do want to highlight this point around policy. Samaya mentioned it earlier on. We are seeing rises in policy landscape around the world, so legislative landscape, fueled largely by the UN Cybercrime Convention we saw last year, which I think had 72 countries sign on. Next week, we see the implementation in the US of the Take It Down Act. So these are legislations or legislative moves that will respond and do respond to NCII, particularly from the Cybercrime Convention. Article 16 is entirely new and requires member states to criminalise NCII where it exists for individuals in their country. That's why one of the pieces of work that's going on that we're doing is around a national model framework. So trying to determine and promote, signpost, highlight examples of where legislation and other aspects, victim support, mechanisms to help intervene with NCII exists. And so that was launched as a preliminary blueprint at UNCSW in March in New York. But coming back right to the start of my intervention, I did want to look at this in terms of an introduction to stopncii.org. So we created this in partnership with Meta and launched it back in December 2021, so coming up to 5 years old. What it stands for is any adult anywhere in the world who's experiencing the threat of having their intimate content, or indeed the fear of having their intimate content posted online, but without their consent. And it is the world's first device-side hashing technology. So it works by the individual themselves visiting the website, stopncii.org, and creating a hash, a digital fingerprint of their intimate content. So they don't share their intimate content, or it always remains on their device. In terms of privacy preserving, that was one of the red lines for us. So there's no sharing of images, there's no central image database. This is just all about hashes being created, digital fingerprints being created on each and every their own device. But it's that hash code, the digital fingerprint, that gets added onto a data bank, and we immediately then share that with participating platforms to enable them to prevent anyone else anywhere in the world from posting and sharing their intimate content on their platforms. And so there is a video, but I'm going to step through the video. Today, stopncii.org we're protecting over 2 million images, and we know it's worked over 40,000 times. It's actively prevented 40,000 intimate content from being shared online. Very important to us as well is it says 124, it's actually 127 NGOs around the world working in this space in terms of a community, a collaboration with these NGOs with equal aims to how to take content and get NCI content removed. So these are the current platforms that take and use Stop NCI hashes, and so again in this privacy preserving manner they act on those particular signals. In terms of activities and developments that we have ongoing at the moment is the development with the support of the foreign FCDO is the creation of what is the Global Clearing Centre, so allowing automated reporting and automated takedown of NCI content. So this is in context of the revenge porn helpline, so it's automating a lot of the mechanisms that we have to therefore also create what is nationally an NCI registry and an NCI URL list to enable the internet infrastructure to be able to act on content that we have verified as being NCII content from a particular UK victim, essentially enabling to prevention, because it will also automatically get added into the Stop NCII infrastructure. We can't do this alone. And so it's fantastic to be able to then work as a pilot with 6 other NGOs around the world, 6 other organisations, and it is makes today even more important for us, given that Taiwan are one of the 6 original piloting organisations through June and Joe and team, which we pay huge tribute to, and the work that they do from a Taiwanese perspective, but on an international stage too, alongside these other fantastic organisations. So that was largely my contribution, talking specifically about NCII as a particular case study and the impact that this sort of harm has on individuals, but how we can do all of this as well through freedom of expression and the precision around content takedown and content reporting. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Cai Huiru. I am from the Taiwan Media Foundation, and today I would like to talk about actually in the time of taking down. We can't just think about whether or not we take the posts down. It's difficult. What's more difficult is to see how they derank or demote and to lower the visibility, to realize the visibility in the platforms. I would like to thank our previous 2 speakers to talk about how NCIIs can be taken down. How do we tackle this together, and how in UK you have a new Online Safety Act that inspire me in new ways. And today at the Taiwan Media Watch Foundation, I would like to talk about the public information to see how governance can actually be an issue. We're not just looking at taking down the posts, the contents, but to see who has the right to decide what contents can be seen or not seen at all. And it also talk about how these private companies, private platforms, they hold great power in the fact that public visibility is a power that's held by them. This is not just an issue of technology or corporate governance. It should be taken higher to democratic accountability. So why does this matter? It also goes back to what I said earlier on about platform governance. It's not just about removal. In the past, this is what we think about moderation. You stop a content from being posted, you take down an account. But what we're seeing more and more in the new governance is the content still exists, but it's downranked. This account can still post things, but they cannot reach the other audience. So you have ranking that decides what is seen first, and then you have the down ranking that pushes the content back, and you have de-amplification that reduces spread and reach, and you have labeling that shapes understanding through context. So at our foundation, what we would like to emphasize is that platforms increasingly govern visibility, and it decides the distribution of people's attention, and it comes back to the power distribution. So I think freedom of expression is not just legally whether or not you're allowed to say things, but in the real environment when information is being spread, can you be seen and can you be discussed or be understood? I have some very preliminary theoretical framing. In the interest of time, I can't really go into them, but I would like to think about how we imagine the algorithm for users. They don't actually see the algorithm, but they feel its effect. For news workers, people in NGO or users, they guess about what kind of content can be spread, what kind of contents will be downranked. It's visibility becomes predictable, yet a resource that's unguaranteed. So for news workers, for NGOs, how do they promote this content so people can see, and that is interfered by the invisible logic? And also we need, what we have always talked about is platform should be neutral, but it's not supposed to be that way. We need to redefine platforms as a governor of public discourse. They have algorithms, they have rules that decides what can be seen publicly. So when we talk about platform society, what we can imagine is when the democratic society is being commercialized, or everything that you see is decided by what the platform shapes. Whether or not you can see the public information is not something that's naturally a natural course, but it's decided by the social and economic drivers. So it's not, these platforms is not just a platform for communication, but a power structure that's formed by social and economic drivers. So that comes to our idea today about invisible moderation. It's a governance that you cannot see, a power struggle that you cannot see. So we can see contents that are not deleted. The platform doesn't delete the news account, but it can be removed or excluded from recommendations from commercialized operations. So the content doesn't need to be deleted to lose its effect. If it cannot be seen, it cannot be discussed, and it's being marginalized in the entire public discourse. And I think in the contemporary platform policy, that's the core. So we need to think about this to understand the users. Also, through the algorithm, through commercialized methods, it becomes an incentive for people for the platforms to decide what goes first, what's being pushed out. So it doesn't naturally reflect the public discourse, but shapes the public discourse. And it comes back to whether or not the platform can moderate or decide things. But when it ranks certain things, will the news agencies and the NGOs understand what's going on? No, and it's not being regulated by a third party. So that's one of the most biggest problem about platform governance. And also public interest contents are at risk because news involves war, protests, and human rights. These are very sensitive issues. It's very sensitive, but it has public value. But under the moderating logic of the platform, these can be marginalized, and these platforms may not understand what the context or the irony that is being used in this post. The platforms may perform better safe than sorry principle and leads to over restriction and flag these contents as high risk. So it's a structural pressure to the news workers. The closer you are to the reality, when it's very complicated, when it's very conflicting, or when it's very difficult to discuss, it makes it very difficult. When you are marginalized, it makes the public difficult to understand and also discuss what you're trying to say. So Taiwan faces a double pressure environment. We have FIMI, we have deepfake, we have coordinated behavior, but it doesn't mean the platforms shouldn't govern. Governance is still very important for a democratic society. We can no longer use intransparent operations against transparent logics. So when you are deranked, you need to think about whether you have reporting channels. If your posts are deranked, or your posts about human rights or about war, about protests are being marginalized and you cannot be seen, this undermines our democratic soft power. And also, I'll skip about international comparison. I'll take 1 minute to discuss the last part. For our foundation, what we claim is that public platform governance should be visible accountability. It's not just to leave the risky contents at large, but we should establish a new democratic governance. The first thing is about transparency. The platforms has the right and the responsibility to explain ranking and downranking rules. You have to disclose moderation and recommendation metrics, and you need to have your due process. It's not just giving all your commercial secrets away.
Number 2 is due process. The platform should provide adequate reasons as well as appeal pathway. Without the proper reason and without an appeal scheme, then it is not accountable. And finally, there is external oversight. A platform should not be the sole referee, and the government should not be the moderator that is unchecked. Therefore, if there's a multi-stakeholders participation, for instance, the media, the scholars, as well as the civil society and the necessary oversight mechanism, this will actually enable the governance to become more democratic. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jerry from Dist. I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to share some of my thoughts on this issue. Before I begin, I would like to briefly explain our company. Our company was founded in 2011. We started our first version during that year. During that time, we only want a friend-forming platform, and then it has grown to become a very popular platform among the young people in Taiwan. Dist is slightly different from Facebook and Instagram. Facebook is a social media platform based on human relationship. Dist has different categories. For instance, if you have kids, then you can go to a specific section. You like fine dining, you can go to another specific section. Therefore, in our platform, the different topics are divided by interests. Next, I would like to talk about how do we balance freedom of speech and content moderation. We actually take two approaches. First is from the perspective of Dist ourselves. First, we have a guidelines for our platform. In addition, for every board, we have also the guidelines for specific boards. In addition, we have around 30,000 messages on Dist posted every day. We want our users to tell us that whether the messages violated any rules of our board or of our platform. So if a message is being complained, and then this is one of the first that we will deal with. Another that is very particular is that we have an appeals system. Every user, if they feel that their privacy has been infringed or their copyright has been infringed, they can actually report this to the platform. As long as we are sure that you are the person concerned, then we will take action. Number 4 is the appeal system. We help the authorities in investigating potential criminal actions. Number 5 is that there are oftentimes government agencies that would require us to assist in investigation, and we will gladly do so. In addition, I'd like to share this. I'd like to talk about the role of the governments and platforms. How do we achieve a balance? I'm talking about this because currently the different agencies have their own power. In other words, the efforts are not consolidated. They are very fragmented. Therefore, this is the approach that we take. Number one is notification. We hope that the legislation can state very clearly that if there's an incident, then we will be informed and we will give it time to appropriately deal with this issue. So what will happen next? In the past, we have encountered this incident. A certain law was amended, and then a certain item was listed as being illegal. And after that, we have received fines and also notices from the competent authority. It is because the authorities saw that users have made advertisements on our platform, and the contents are determined to be unlawful. After we received the notice, we actually have discovered that there were this kind of advertisements, and we removed the content within 2 days. It shows that our own monitoring system is in place, but we were still fined. Therefore, what we want to emphasize here is that how do we perfect our system? How do we perfect our system in relation with the government? In other words, if a user finish its message and want to upload his message, we need to make sure that the messages do not contain the keywords or the unlawful words listed by the different government agencies. We have also referenced the regulations in the EU, which says that the platform has the obligation to notify. Secondly, we hope that after we have complied with certain regulations, and then we need not care about further notices from the government agencies. I'll give you an incident. In the past, we were requested to assist in investigation. We provided the information of the users, and it was determined that the users had committed unlawful acts. The user actually uploaded a message on our platform, and our platform is only a medium. However, the law states that if the platform doesn't assist in the investigation, we will be fined from 50 to 100,000. However, if we comply, we will also be fined with a higher value. In other words, if we assist in the investigation, we will be fined. If we don't assist, we will also be fined. Therefore, we want to find a middle ground. Number three is that we hope that for every industry there will be a clear demarcation. I'd like to talk about the Anti-Fraud Act. It has a very clear definition of digital advertisement. This is very good. This is beneficial for us. In other words, that it will help us deal with marketing or also word-of-mouth marketing. As long as there is no cash flow between the user and our platform, then we will be less accountable, because we will not be able to know whether a message is actually an act of marketing or a word-of-mouth marketing. So without all of this mechanism in place, then there's no way for us to protect ourselves. We will not be able to tell whether a message is educational, it is for the public good, and the only thing that we could do is to just remove all of the keywords. I don't think this is the one this is a thing that you want to see. And finally, I'd like to mention the proportionality. When we talk about, for instance, a code, right? We hope that the internet industry in Taiwan will be able to develop very healthily. There are many own brands in Taiwan, and each of the brands are actually coming from different companies of different sizes. and therefore their ability to take on risks will also be different. And finally, I suggest that we establish a channel for multi-level participation. I want to cite an example, iWin, which is a mechanism for protecting internet content. iWin play a very important role because it holds regular meeting of the different stakeholders. We can actually discuss issues in a very timely manner. And this is one way where we could actually address issues very quickly. And we hope that when we want to protect the children and the young people, iWin can give us very timely recommendations. And these are some of the guidelines that I have proposed. Basically, I hope that the users, the platform operators, and the government can find a very good way to work together. And we hope that by working together, we will be able to balance freedom of speech and content moderation. Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to thank our four very distinguished guests for their very insightful comments. As the moderator, I would like to make use of the remaining time to ask one question of each of our speakers. And I hope that our speakers will be able to answer the questions in 3 to 4 minutes. I will start with our first speaker, who is Camilla. My question is, the European Digital Services Act has different regulations on the different platform operators. So I'd like to ask you, what is the measures taken by Ofcom in this regard? My second question is, I'd like to address this to David. How can platforms, without infringing too much on the freedom of speech, deal with NCII? How do you investigate the presence of NCII? Next, I would like to ask Ms. Chai, if a platform doesn't take down a content, but instead downrank a certain message, how do you look at this power? Do you regard this as a autonomous decision, or do you look at this as a part of moderation? And my final question is to Jerry. Do you think that technology can hinder the legal speeches? So these are my questions, and let us start with our first speaker, Camilla.
Thank you. We like to say in the UK that the Online Safety Act is the regulatory cousin of the DSA. They're kind of genetically related, but not identical. I think the measures that are on the menu for each regime are very similar. I mean, they're both based on platforms producing risk assessment, so assessing the risks that their service design creates, and then taking mitigating actions to address those risks. And that's supported by what we call transparency obligations, so the need to respond to inquiries from the regulator and to report on a regular basis along a number of metrics so that we can maintain a degree of accountability for what they're doing. And also things like what has been described during the course of the panel, algorithm transparency in particular, the availability of user complaints and redress mechanisms. So those are things that are common, I think, across both regimes. I think from the perspective, I mean, those are all intended to operate in a way which is respecting of freedom of expression. But I think the important point to make is that it's not just about what measures you put in place. It's also about the regulatory principles that you adopt as you regulate. And I would say there are a handful of regulatory principles which contribute to helping ensure that we are respectful of freedom of expression as regulators, and that users' freedom of expression is maximally protected. So one is, I mentioned earlier, having a risk-based framework. So we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. Really, we try to look at service-specific solutions as much as possible, because they, even within a sort of a single category of service like social networks, there are huge variations in terms of their typical audience, users, service features, the type of content that you might find there. And so we really need to be as targeted and specific as possible in order to maximally protect freedom of expression. We also, in designing measures, need to think about minimizing the friction that users will encounter as they seek to express their freedom of expression. So that really the friction that we introduce is for the type of content that is either illegal or, in the case of children, harmful. And finally, something about the visibility and the transparency of our own thinking as a regulator. So we must consult publicly on all of our draft guidance documents, codes of practice, and that's really important. And we really value the inputs that we get through that public consultation process. We need to be very clear about what harms we're trying to address with our interventions, and to provide evidence. So we spend inordinate amount of resource at Ofcom on research, which helps to inform our decisions about where the risks lie, and so that we can target our interventions and to justify the types of interventions that we propose. So rights-respecting regulation is partly about the measures themselves, but it's also significantly about the process.
Yeah, for the question, and just to reiterate the question, but actually before I get to this question, there's another point. But the question was, how can platforms implement proactive measures against harmful content such as NCII without creating systems that risk overreach or infringe on users' rights of freedom of expression? And the point I want to get to before the how is the why. Why should platforms? Now, you've heard me talk about some of the numbers that we're facing in terms of the helpline, just from a UK perspective, that exponential growth. One of the questions that we asked ourselves is, with a 20-fold increase in 5 years, which is essentially doubling, how big is this problem? How many people are experiencing NCII? So from a UK perspective, in October 2024, the National Chief Police Council published some data that said 3,000 women a day report gender-based violence in the UK. 8% of the population, 1 in 12. Another piece of research said that of gender-based violence, 17% experience NCII. So 17% of 8% is 1.42%. 1.42% of the entire adult female population will experience NCII annually. So that gives us a number of 369,242. Or the entire adult female population of our second biggest city, Birmingham and or Manchester. So I'm not suggesting these are necessarily transferable, but it gives us a frame about how big. That does mean that last year, for every one woman we supported, there were 53 experiencing this that we didn't. It gives us an idea of scale, which then comes back to the question about how. That is the why, how. So 2 things I think I would offer. One, you're going to want to expect what I'm going to say, but the first one I'm going to talk about is trusted flagger programs. For platforms, for industry, to work with trusted flagger programs across the world. Typically NGOs, equally regulators in different countries, organizations that support individuals in various different parts of harm from us. Like I said, the 127 NGOs around the world. So working with those as a trusted flagger program. The second one, and probably more obviously, which is to use the technology that is available. There is technology that's well trodden, particularly being developed to prevent child sexual abuse material, CSAM, or terrorist content. Those sorts of technologies which we're using within Stop NCII, which we can powerfully, whilst not overstepping and infringing on any freedom of expression, is to allow individuals experiencing this harm to get those signals out to platforms immediately, to immediately prevent that harm, to put power back in the hands of those experiencing what is distressing, unbelievably distressing situations and threat on their lives. So you say using technologies like Stop NCII from an NCI perspective, but it also signpost as well, Take It Down, NetMex Take It Down, which works in the same way. Project Lantern from Tech Coalition, all about signal sharing amongst tech platforms. So Stop NCI 2 last month started receiving hashes from industry. So where they've reported content, or they've had content reported to them by their own users, they can insert that hash into the system too to prevent other platforms from having that content loaded added to their platform. We know that this is a systematic issue. Content is never always in one place. It's in multiple places. And we have the technology to be able to share those signals, like I say, amongst to affect precision for immediate or next to immediate content takedown. So that very much for me is the how. Thank you.
Thank you. The question was actually rather important, and it responds to what I mentioned earlier on. In fact, we tend to think that not taking contents down, but using other reasons to downrank you. How do you define that right? First of all, we talk about how you govern visibility. It's different from taking down contents because it doesn't make the contents disappear, but this content is removed of its public influence. That's what you need to govern, because downranking leaves trace, but removal leaves trace, but downranking does not. So when you are manipulating the ranking, the platform talks about it like it's an optimization of user experience or some kind of risk control. So for the foundation, we believe that it's not that the platform cannot moderate the contents, or that the content should just allow all the contents to be rampant. But when you have this ranking and downranking influence, it will influence how the news perform and the exposure rate in Taiwan. 99.9% of the people in Taiwan use various SNS and platforms to expose themselves to public news. How do the people have access to these public information or not have access to these information? It's greatly implicating, and it's a product that's designed by private companies, and it impacts public governance. So as the CEO of the foundation and also a critic of the platform moderation, the platform doesn't disallow you to speak, but it decides who can be seen, who can be heard, and systematically make you disappear and marginalize you. And it's an infrastructural power. From the infrastructure, they adjust what can be seen or not, and it could also be a political, economic power of the platform, and this power should be discussed and looked at. So it's not that the platform cannot adjust the rankings, but when they are adjusting the ranking of the news and the public discourse, do you have a rationale? Can we report it? Can the news workers participate in how the news contents are being ranked? If not, all of this is just private moderation, and it cannot be censored or monitored. Thank you. Okay, Jerry from Dcard. As Huiru touched on this, I am also think about how technology intervention will implicate freedom of expression. We launched a function which automatically hides certain responses. So we want to shape a more positive discussion. So we use AI. The content, if it has hatred or discriminative words, we lower its ranking so people tend not to see it more. That was our initial intention. But when we were testing it, we realized something. AI is actually more strict than real person. For example, this person says he thinks that the flight experience was really good because the flight attendant was really nice, but the AI finds it discriminative and they hide these contents. So yes, we can potentially limit or hide contents that may not have a problem. So we ask AI to rank the seriousness of the contents. We don't take it down, and we only ask AI to treat the most serious ones. And we go into the posts or replies that were hidden, and we manually decide whether or not to release them. And there are supervisory agencies that you may think that the platforms have really good technology and algorithm, and they ask us to remove certain restricted contents. The regulators gave us over 400 words that cannot be used, including sugar or metal appliances, houseware appliances, and things like that. And if you really apply this, you are going to see that if you go to certain e-commerce platforms, you cannot search for sugar or candy because people don't want to receive a fine. So could it implicate freedom of expression? Yes, but I think we need a very good package to solve this problem and to build a better collaboration. Thank you. Thank you to our 4 speakers for your explanation. I was just notified that in the interest of time, we have to end this session here. Thank you to our 4 speakers to touch on how to balance freedom of expression and governance. And we have perspective from Taiwan and UK. We would like to thank our 4 speakers for the wonderful sharing, and I hope that I'm sure the audience is all inspired. Thank you very much. Now we would like to ask our speakers to stay on stage. We're going to take a group photo. Please look at the camera in front of you.
And give your best smile. 3, 2, 1. 摄影师，我们还在一张吗？ One more photo, please. Thank you. 3, 2, 1. Great, thank you. Thank you very much. You may now return to your seat.